Oh my. No, we just can't get it right, can we? Yeah, that helped. Hey. So, Unhappy King Charles. This is a few years old. I think listed in 2008. And, so the first thing I want to say is, I kind of enjoy it. I had some fun with it. I had fun with it both opposed. And that's one quick question is, did I like this more right away because I played it opposed? Well, I played 30 Years' War opposed after I played it solo, and I feel I still like that better, and there's a similarity between the two. There's this sort of blundering around, doing things, trying to grab stuff. Your armies don't have to worry about too many things. There's some supply effects, etc. But for the most part, they're armies. Nobody's in the way to stop them, and they're kind of solid units. Which, you know, it's not like you have to worry about protecting your supply lines and building these linear setups, etc. That makes the thing just fun, right? That same factor, I think, fits in 30 Years' War for me. As a historical feel, it's hard for me to judge it. Like with 30 Years' War, I feel like it's correct in this game, but it's hard for me to judge how much of the rest of it, you know, beyond that spirit which you really catch, and then, you know, the historical aspects with the cards, etc., how much of the rest of it is really spot on. Could you do better? Could you capture as much, maybe giving away something on the flavor side in exchange for something else on detail or something, by making a more detailed war game? And I'm not sure you can. I'm really not sure you can. It almost feels like the lightness of the point-to-point movement, for example, is almost necessary for the kind of looseness that you want to portray here, of being able to move around, being able to influence one another with interception and everything, but it all works very well in this game. Compared to some others where I don't think it works as well. In particular, I want to think right there about something I've just replayed with my wife, which is No Peace Without Spain. I feel like historically, No Peace Without Spain handles its era every bit as well as King Charles does. And yet I slammed that game in my review and throughout the play on what felt like this lightness to the whole thing. Now granted, there's a little bit of that, that's this personal, emotional problem about the fact that I can't get my hands on Grand Sequel, I think, and whether or not that's going to be sufficient, I don't know. But basically that there isn't something that handles Spanish Succession War at the right level. But I'm not convinced there's something that handles this at the right level. The only other strategic game I know of, maybe there's others, is another Vassy creation, a little earlier. And it doesn't look terribly heavy either. It looks pretty, it looks nice. The counters are fairly simple. Okay, that can go either way. But when we pull the map out, and yeah, I'll be getting to this at some point, it's, you know, kind of a point-to-point system. And the rules look a little heavier, but a lot of it looks like scenarios more than anything else. They're actually a fairly light rule book, only 15 pages, comparatively. And we'll see. But I don't think that it's going to be a terribly more detailed situation. Anyway, all I'm saying is maybe some of the arguments that I have used in favor or against No Peace Without Spain aren't what really is there. What really may be there is, for such a light game, it doesn't have the sheer pleasure that playing something like Unhappy King Charles has. Both games have this, and 30 Years' War as well, a lot of luck involved in them, which can kind of generate a certain level of tension. There's no question there. This one has a tremendous amount. You're rolling a die and adding it to troop strengths that are probably fairly close. So a six-sided die is more or less your combat here. With a close battle, it can swing to a decisive victory either way. With a not-so-close battle, well, we've seen those not turn out to be victories for the person who seemed to have the overwhelming advantage. Oh, that's interesting. All that kind of makes sense to me, adds to the tension and enjoyment to it. Some people will really dislike the amount of luck in a game like this. But I feel like No Peace Without Spain had that same sort of tension and luck in terms of what's going on, but you don't get these wild swings from it. You have the enemy stumble back and you're kind of hurt, and it's all perfectly within the historical situation in that game. It just doesn't feel like fun in the same way. And that's kind of disturbing to me, because now I'm starting to say, okay, if I'm judging games, on this fun factor and not reporting that, not noticing that that's what's really wrong, that I'm not really, catching the hook from it, well, maybe I'm doing something very wrong in my thoughts and my analysis. I'm letting the wrong things anger me, whatever. In this case, well, let's look at the components. The map's a little, bright colored, Candyland-ish, whatever. It stands out well. It's very easy to read and see what's going on. There's always a kind of a balance there, right? I haven't seen too many of these games fail completely in terms of being unreadable. A couple of them. Clash of Monarchs is probably the worst there, and it's a great game. But I think going to this kind of distinction in color and jumping out at you may be a little bit too much overboard. It doesn't take a lot away from the game, though. It's much prettier to see that beautiful board. There's a certain visceral pleasure to looking at it. But this works to play. It doesn't get in your way. It's not so garish that you just say, I don't want to see it. Player aid cards, useful, no question. We got this little back of the rule sheet, which gives actually just about everything you really need. This is the player aid card that it's almost invariably my problem that I don't look at these things in time. Luckily, by playing this with my wife, I was able to get to look at it earlier, and so I'm kind of infused with it by the time I do this. That's one of the problems. If I play a game first time solo for you guys, well, you're facing my first frustrations, and my frustrations with any system are going to be kind of high. And you hear that. You can't let it tone you too much. I try to give a fair review of things. I think I actually did in some ways with No Peace Without Spain. I think I just expressed a lot of frustration that didn't really matter with it. And likewise with this, I'm expressing a lot of things that have nothing to do with this game, right? All right. Hey, you get what you pay for, right? Counters, nice, decent quality. The only thing I'm iffy about is this, is the flag markers. They're kind of, I don't know, not as pretty as I like. On the map, in terms of that, it's not too bad when you don't have to look up specific locations, but when you have to look up specific locations, the map, keeping the names of the locations inside the circles is a difficult choice for finding things. It makes it very clear where something actually is. This is actually this. You don't have overrunning and any questions like that. But there'll be counters on top of just about everything with these little markers. So chances are you're going to have to move a lot of markers to find what you're looking for. It's already hard enough if you're not familiar with English geography. Luckily, I'm familiar with some of it, but there are things like Thirsk I've never heard of. What about the cards? The cards are kind of the more flimsy nature, which makes them perhaps easier to shuffle. but they've gotten kind of this warp on them, and I don't know if this is, how I bought this used, and I don't know if it's how somebody stored it, or if it's just a nature of these thinner cards to do this. I've actually noticed them kind of bending and such not under my use in a way that most of the later lighter cards haven't done. So these might be exceptionally light. If there's a reprint, obviously, the quality of the components could be completely variable. They could do the heavier, stiffer cards or whatever. What's really great about these cards, and this isn't really a component thing, and this is about this game, and what I really love is the way the deck is constructed with this early period, middle period, late period. Yeah, we see a lot of games have taken that or took that before, but the fact that events need not happen, even historical ones, well, we've seen that before. And the alt history deck with a limited amount of new events being thrown into each game. Now, you've got a few choices here. There's not a lot of these. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 cards. And 4 of them are going to make it into the deck. But even if they do, there's no guarantee that they're going to have any significant effect because they could end up in the wrong person's hand. That's actually one of the issues is, half your events are going to end up in the wrong person's hands and probably not come into play. But I don't mind that anywhere near as much as I mind leaving out all the what-ifs. This has a nice way of adding a decent amount of the what-ifs into the game. And given that the cards don't have that kind of powerful effect on the game, except for the few mandatory cards that maybe they do in some other games like Paths of Glory, for example, where you gotta have one in hand and know what your cards that are gonna follow it are gonna be based. That has to be your decision on your play. I don't like that kind of thinking. I like this. This you don't really have to know what the deck's composed of. It's a good idea to know kind of what the big mandatory events are going to be, but I don't feel like the other ones really hurt me. In fact, the fact that most of them aren't events. So there's this, I also explained this, another clever thing here, which is that the operations and the events are split. Now you're drawing from the same deck, and you can use an event as a semi-operation, but as a one-point limited operation, it does less. But for the most part, it's very cool not to be making that choice. Hey, do I want this event to happen, or that maybe I have no control over, or do I want to do something, moving my armies and everything? In a game like this, as opposed to, say, Paths of Glory, World War I, World War II, even maybe Napoleonic, it feels like the armies had a lot more control in terms of the leader, the general staff even, could have sort of a grand plan. In something like this, or 30 Years' War, or even, Washington's War, much as I might diss that for other things, it kind of makes sense that things are sort of ad hoc, that maybe operations kind of just fall in there, etc. It makes a lot less sense to me that the sinking of the Lusitania is going to prevent the Allied player from conducting an offensive. What? Why? I just can't make that link here in that. And I don't feel like there's as much sort of room in the more modern games for the kind of leeway in the game design that goes into some of these. Maybe it's just personal taste there. Anyway, this one's, to me, the tension, the luck, the fluidity to the movement, it all adds up, and the subject matter as well, no question. It all adds up to kind of a fun to play game. Still feels light. Doesn't feel like I'm playing a big war game. I sit down and read the rules, though. The rules are painful. So many of these CDGs, and Some of it's the formatting. There's no question. Some of it, and Charles Vassy even points out, he thinks he was too verbose. Some of it is the rules are just too verbose. Cut it down a lot, it becomes easier to find what you need. Just say what you need to. I enjoy a well-written, easy-to-read rule book, but in this case, I feel like it failed to maintain that usability factor. It also fails to have, oh no, this one does. So this one has a decent index, which helps a little bit, but I find it hard to find what I'm looking for, even with the index. It has an index, it has a table of contents, both about the same size, so that should give you a lot of insight into something. If there were a lot less words, you'd find what you needed very, very quickly. Unfortunately, it takes a few rereadings of a couple of paragraphs necessarily to find that line you need, because there's a lot of what doesn't look like jokes around it either. It looks like serious rule parts, it's just a little too wordy. And that definitely is painful to me. Now here's the real problem though, it's with the system designs. It's with the way that every CDG, and I've brought this up before, every CDG seems to have its own very different system. This one has its own completely different combat system. It has its own card system. It's like approaching a whole new style of games again and again each time. Even though they're very, there's some similarities across the design idea, they're not able to carry over as many concepts as, your traditional, say, operational game will. Where, honestly, you grab those SPI games and you can flip through most of those pages of rules just saying, I know all this, I know all this. It's like the standard combat series there. It's, hey, all war games kind of do this. Well, now all war games don't. And the startup cost is very heavy for these guys. And it doesn't help when they end up with a lot of rules that they don't necessarily need. This at 28 pages, this feels like it's just weighing in too heavy for the way it feels like it plays. I don't know what I'd get rid of. I really don't. These first pages, the intro, that gives you a good idea of the feel of the play. There's no question there. The components, no question. That's, a nice little breakdown and kind of a good way to enter into the game. Glossary, it doesn't rely on it too heavily. Therefore, I find it not annoying like I do with some of the CDG GMT designs. Then we jump right into setup. I'd prefer that at the back, but that's okay. Sequence of play, good. Kind of explains everything. And it really, here's a problem. The strategy cards describing how to use these, the rules themselves, take you from page 8 to 12. Unfortunately, this also includes some special individual cards in there. But you can kind of skip over that when you're not looking for them. It's just, that's a big chunk to explain the mechanisms involved in delivering cards. And you can't skip over it because they're different. They're not going to be the same as every other game. And then recruitment, again, very different, very new rules in here. Do they have to be as wordy? I don't think so. I think this could be condensed a good deal. Anyway, overall it's a good game, and certainly you wouldn't be facing the same rules issues if it was something you played a few times a year. Although even walking away from one playing where I struggled through the rules, I still had trouble right away in the next one. So, like most of these CDGs, you get your most bang for your buck out of them if you're someone who likes to play the same game again and again. Just pull it out, play a couple of, play one game for a couple months or whatever, and then switch on. That's the exact the exact opposite of how I treat games, though. I usually like to pull them out, play them once, and then learn them and explore them again the next time. Maybe because there isn't so much difference in the strategy, in the ideas, in most war games. And that may be more pleasing to me or whatever. I know I have the same problem with the Euro designs. Anyway, overall, I think this is a pretty good game. And definitely one that I got a kick out of. Maybe more enjoyment than I hold, respect in my rating, which is kind of a weird situation. But it's like, well, it's a light game. I can't give it too high a rating. It's kind of a war game, and it's light. I don't know what's wrong with me in that situation, but I did have a really good time playing it, and my wife definitely enjoyed it as well, compared to most CDGs. All right. Hey, I just wanted to record this because when I was playing Unhappy King Charles, which is back there, and maybe even see it over there, it was pointed out to me that I was playing by the wrong rules, which is no big surprise. I often screw up the rules, and when something, when I'm facing a CDG type situation where I've shown you how many bad issues I've had with the rules. But anyway, there's you're not allowed to, you don't take desertion losses if you're under like 5 units or something, 5 brigades. And that certainly would have changed the flavor, I think, of the game that I was playing, because we had both sides really, knocked down almost continuously below that level. So they wouldn't have taken any desertion losses, which might have been a slight advantage for the Royalists, and might have actually changed the way the game played. How much does it affect my view of the game? Well, I played one with my wife where it wasn't until the very end of the game that we were hitting those limits, actually. And, it felt very similar. It really did. The same kind of blundering about, smacking into each other. I think it would help a little bit. It does feel a little odd to have the entire army go on each turn, for the Royalists especially. So, if anything, it would just add to a little positive side of it. Anyway, this is being added as an addendum, but I'm going to stick it on in the front. Oh yeah, what the hell, I'll stick it on in the back of my review. So there you have it.